Otter raft. After the debacle of putting 5 tubes together, even though the raft worked good that we built, the trip was terrible. Um, I made it a mission to look everywhere to buy a raft. And at that time, I didn't know about NRS and a lot of these places you can go to now. Of course, there was no internet in 1986. So I saw an ad, 200 bucks, Otter raft. The sweet deal was it came with 4 paddles, 2 wooden paddles, which I actually used at first. Carlisle paddles is typically what I use now, but it came with 2 Carlisle paddles, one red, one blue, which the red ones are kind of rare now. Actually, I think the red one came apart. It would actually fold up and snap back on. And I don't know if there's such thing anymore, but and then it came with a double pump and a electrical pump that goes onto a battery. Uh, One of the Carlisle paddles I'm still using. The electrical pump I think could still work, but I don't use it. But the double pump is on my raft. The last time I went rafting, less than a week ago. So equipment is important, and buying the right equipment can last. But I bought this new raft, and I took a bunch of inexperienced kids rafting with an inexperienced guide. So my point is training is key. Be trained on the river, to know the river, to know guiding, to know the boats, to know the equipment. And some of my first faults was, going on rivers that I didn't know with people who weren't trained. I took that Otter down every river run I'd ever done. Then got a new book, North's book, and shows a bunch of rivers. Before I was just finding them myself. So now I'm looking them up, going to the Nook Sack and Wenatchee. Well, I guess I already did the Wenatchee, but Seattle, uh, onward, Snoqualmie, onward. Anyway, we go up to the Nook Sack with these 5 church kids, and one guy was actually experienced with me. He'd done some rafting with me prior to that. And it's important to know your crew. I don't always agree with commercial guides that anybody who shows up gets to go down. Um, Maybe if they've got a nice crew, they've got a whole boat of people, they have safety boats, and they're coming in and out, and they've got everything set up. That's different. But for people like me in private boaters who just go out with 2 or 3 boats, and maybe we're on a river nobody else is on, we have to think about ourselves a little bit more. If you show up to go rafting with me and you're drunk, stoned, incoherent, you ain't going. Sorry, I don't care if you're my best friend. You ain't going. Um, I learned this from the Nook Sack trip. First, we did the lower run. It was class 3. We did pretty well. And I noticed there was a bunch of rapids upstream of the Nook Sack, upstream of the park, the national park right there. You know, you don't jump in a river till you know what it's all about. And we climbed up this trail. There's a trail right from the park. You could see a bunch of 3, 4 foot drops, but you don't see the big ones before that. So I found a way. We all had to go down a steep, steep embankment to come down to the river, and we got into the river. And it's a self bailer, so once the water comes in, it stays in until you bail it out. So we hit the first hole, and it just swamped the whole raft. I mean, it was huge. I was not expecting it to be that big. And then we're bailing out, and I notice one guy is out of the raft. Just one guy. Okay, we paddle, grab him, pull him back in. We got him all stuff out. And I said, okay, now you sit in the middle on the thwart, because the Otter raft, the difference between my dad's raft and the Otter raft is it had blow-up thwarts, seats in the middle. That helps a lot. I had 4 chambers, so, if one chamber blew down, I have 3 to try to get safely off the river, where before I only had 1 or 2 chambers. I think one of the rafts we had only had 1 chamber. You blew it, it was gone. So I put him right in the middle of the raft. We hit the next hole, which did the same thing. filled us with water. Everybody's barely hanging on. Same guy falls out of the raft. I put him in the middle of the raft, in between two other people. They didn't fall out. I was like, what the heck? So I stopped this time, got all the water out, make sure we could try to get down this thing back to the takeout, which is now the park, which is usually the beginning of the run. So we get back to the run, or we're getting back to the run, and we hit like the last big hole. But this time, as I'm not guiding as a guide. I'm just sitting on the right, yelling out paddles. I don't know what guiding means at that point in '86. I watched him, and a wave came up over the bow and hit him in the chest, and he just fell backwards. There wasn't enough water to knock him out. It was like he'd given up on life, and just, oh, well, I guess I just fall out now. This is the third time he's fallen out within like less than 15 minutes. Sometimes some people shouldn't be on the river. And since that point on, I have made it a point to train everybody I can, psychologically, verbally. I show them in the backyard. I show them on the river before we get in the river. I teach them, train them every other possibility. Sometimes I actually have guide training, which is something else that I want to establish for a short amount of time. I'm not training the world. I'm just might do a little guide training for my own personal preferences. But you got to know your people. And the most important thing is that training is key to survival on the river.